Welcome to On the Brink with Andi Simon. It's always a pleasure, truly a treat to bring you into our home and our business to tell you about really cool, wonderful people who are doing some amazing things. And I must tell you that some come to me and some I go looking for, but my job is to help you see all the changes that are happening through a fresh lens. These are great times. At least I think they are. Now, you may differ, but at the end of the day, the changes are coming. Whether it's a fourth industrial revolution, or maybe just AI, or maybe chat, whatever it is, it's changing the way we do things, do business, and feel. And I'm absolutely honored today to have a terrific individual with us who's going to tell us about his own journey and about the product and program and business he's running that's going to help you change the way you meet. So, Ramsey Pryor is our guest today. Ramsey, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Andy. It's my pleasure to be here.
Now, if he disappears, he just had his seventh earthquake out in California. And so we're going to just go through our podcast today, hoping that we get through for the next half hour or so. He's going to tell you more about himself, but very briefly, he's the CEO and founder of Rumi.ai, an AI-powered meeting intelligence platform. And you're going to say, what's that? That helps teams capture knowledge, streamline follow-ups, and boost productivity by automatically summarizing meetings, tracking action items, and integrating all that has to get done with tools like Slack, Salesforce, and HubSpot. And we were HubSpot partners up until recently. Our mission is to turn every meeting into a valuable, shareable insights so teams can focus on what matters instead of a manual note-taking or chasing context. Now, my hope is that what Rumi can do for you is make your life better. Because it isn't simply about note-taking. It's can you read your notes when you're done? Do you know what they've said? Can you capture the emotions? Were you so busy taking notes that you never heard what the meeting was about? So, Ramsey, thanks again for being here. And tell the audience, who is Ramsey? What's your journey been like? And how did this all develop?
Well, thanks for starting there. So I've been in business and in really technology my whole career. And when I graduated college, I really didn't know what I wanted to do specifically, but I had this vague idea that I wanted to do international business. When I looked at the choices, I didn't see anything that really looked like that. So I started in business, but I tried to find some way to make it international at every turn. And so I started in consulting, and then I moved out to California during the dot-com boom. And I guess I've kind of had two passions all the way along. I really like when new technology comes out, the challenge of figuring out what can we do with this and how can this make our lives better. And secondly, my passion just around getting to know more of the world. And so that's kind of what I tried to build into my career. And at various times, it's been really overlapping and really strong. And so I've been in product management. I've been in all different functions, sales, partnerships, but probably my favorite role before Rumi was this job of international expansion for tech companies. So my job was really taking technology once it had taken hold and taking it all around the globe. And so that really aligned both of those interests really well. And I think that's really one of my biggest drivers. And now with Rumi, in launching just in the last couple of years, we've had this amazing opportunity to choose where in the world do we want to start, where do we want to go next, and so much has changed that you can actually be in many places at once, even from the beginning. So in addition to rolling out new technology through Rumi, it's really motivating to me to figure out what part of the world we want to conquer and in what order.
Conquer on. I think this is so exciting, though, because your whole career wasn't with a particular destination, but just curiosity. And I've been to 40 countries. I fully appreciate your curiosity about different cultures, different ways of doing things, and how do you help them using the technology that you're developing. Now, you have to tell us more about how this business developed. How did Rummy emerge? And was it your idea or your ability to implement, give us some context.
Rumi was a pandemic-born business, and the idea actually came from our CTO and co-founder, Michael, who I'd worked with at a previous company. And he, during the pandemic, like many of us, just realized, gosh, I'm spending all my day in meetings. And as an engineer, that's not a good use of his time. But you can't also not attend or else you won't have the information. And so he started working on that was also at the time that the earliest LLMs came out. And he started combining those two thoughts of I don't want to be in meetings all day, but I also need all the information. Isn't there some way of using this technology so that I can get the information that I need without spending all day in meetings I barely participate in? And so that was really the impetus. And it's now been 5 years that we've been working on that challenge. And at its core, we've done a lot of studies on this and read a lot of studies on this, and businesses spend 30+% of their time in meetings. It's a huge investment of manpower and time. And Harvard has done a lot of studying on meeting efficiency, and they found that 2/3 of all meeting time is spent rehashing a meeting that's already happened. And when you add that to things that have been discussed in other places, most of our meeting time is just getting people up to speed, reminding people about stuff that's already been said. And so that's a very big investment of time and a big opportunity to combine what AI is good at, which is remembering everything, and coupling that with what people are very poor at, which is remembering things. So that's what we've been working on. And yeah, that was really the impetus. But this was driven by our CTO, and then he brought me into the business when things got, sort of started getting cooking.
Good. It's so interesting listening to you. It reminds me, I'm an anthropologist, but I was a professor, but for a period of time, I was a banker, and then I got into healthcare. Always when the business environment that these were in were changing. I'll give you my managed care healthcare experience though, because it reminds me exactly what you're talking about. I got into healthcare and I was setting up branding and marketing and advertising for a large healthcare system. And so I went to meetings. There was no agenda. There was no takeaway. And then I realized that attending was the job. And I was fascinated by being, who I was. I'm an observer. And I was curious about, so why are we here? And what am I supposed to do when I leave? So with that as a setup, tell me how Rumi could have saved my life because I spent a whole lot of time wondering, why am I here? And what am I supposed to do? But they attended religiously.
Oh yeah, I've had jobs too where I felt like my entire job was to be on meetings and spent not 30%, but like 90% of my time.
Yep.
We estimated, Joe, I looked at my meeting history from last year, and if I printed out the transcripts from all those meetings, it would be a stack of paper 10 feet tall. And if you multiply that by all people in a business of any size, it's more than any of us can remember. It's more than we can tell our colleagues. And but this is really at its core, this is institutional knowledge.
Mhm.
And so LLMs can eat the entire internet and give you answers. And so relative to that, this is a tiny amount of data. So what we have done is taken all those transcripts, thrown them in a database. You can share them with other people. It's not just your meeting history. And as we've all experienced with ChatGPT, you can ask it a question and get a quick answer. You can ask it to create a table or a document with all that data. There's so much. So I guess coming back to your question, what could you have done with this? You could have skipped all those meetings unless your job was to show up and, smile and observe. But all that information, you could filter it out and just ask for the things that you actually care about instead of being there for every hour and every minute.
Is the data, the information, the note taking, um, proprietary, so that there are gates around it, so only you and only some of you can access it? Does it work? Do you have an agent that also,
Mhm.
give us some more of the how-tos?
Yeah, the rules we apply is that if you were invited to the meeting, then you're privy to the data. And just if someone were really diligent who attended the meeting, they could write every word down too. So we feel like that's fair game. We're just better at taking notes than a human. And if everybody who attends the meeting can get the transcript, and what we call as meeting memory was where we put all of the transcripts that are generated, not just that last meetings. And that's the rules that we have around it. And in order to share that data, you would have to make a decision to do that. Just like if you took a bunch of meeting notes and wanted to forward those or put those in an email and send those to someone. But we make sure that if you were going to have a very private conversation with a colleague, or if you had a one-on-one with a manager, that's the kind of conversation you probably wouldn't record. And obviously, anything super sensitive that you wouldn't want on the record, you also would choose not to record. And we give people the choice of just simply not having the note taker show up, or pausing it if there's a part of the conversation where that you don't want on the record. But we have this notion of on the record, off the record,
Mhm.
and then you can choose how long you choose to keep all this data.
Now, this is for both in-person and Zoom meetings. I mean, it's not just for recorded meetings like you and I are doing. So now I did not accept your note taker. And,
And that's your choice. Yep.
it is my choice. But how do you do it for in-person meetings?
Yeah. So in person, we have a mobile app. So if you and I were sitting down in person, I would ask you, and this is important in the note-taking and AI era, we believe is always getting explicit consent, and state by state, country by country
Mhm.
consent laws differ. But you had the choice, even though I brought my note taker to this meeting, you had the choice of not letting it in, and that's your choice. Same with in-person meetings. I would have to, or I should ask you before I put my phone on the table to record this and put it into meeting memory. So we think that's important. There are some technologies out there that would allow me to record this conversation without your knowledge or consent.
Mhm.
But we feel like that's incredibly important. And so the note taker will announce itself if you would let it in, so other people would be aware that the conversation is being recorded. We have a meeting platform of our own that has a blinking red light, and if someone wants to go off the record and presses pause, it's obvious to everyone it's not on the record and when it comes back on. But
Interesting.
consent is a really important thing in our world.
I guess people also wonder who can erase it or modify it, or is it sacred? How is it protected?
That's a great question too. So, as the host and as the person in your company who's the administrator, if you have a policy of, hey, we only keep data for X number of years, or certain conversations are confidential, therefore, it should never be shared. That's the kind of information we get from our customers, and then we, sort of respect those data retention policies.
It's so interesting. Now, do they control the system or you control the system for them? Which way does it work, or is it both?
The default is we store everything in the cloud. And so just as you would with ChatGPT, you're putting information into sort of cloud-based servers that are shared. So we have one infrastructure, but we separate all the data between customers via sort of encryption and good practices there. But we can also deploy if someone has their own data center and wants complete physical separation of their data, we can deploy in a private cloud as well.
So, if there was a lawsuit of some kind, would you be obligated to provide the data?
So that's again, it varies by the jurisdiction and that sort of thing. But if data is subpoenaed or is part of a discovery process, and we are it's a jurisdiction that where we would have to comply, then yes, we would have to turn over that data to whatever authorities. But we make sure that we are following the laws and wherever we are operating and where our customers are operating.
It's so interesting. You really don't do anything to help the meeting along, or am I mishearing you? It sounds like you're helping the meeting recorded, but do you facilitate better meetings?
Well, I'm glad you asked that, because we actually started before we focused on so much on what to do with all the meeting data. We actually started as a meeting platform, and we still use our own meeting platform instead of Zoom. And inside of that meeting platform, we have AI built into the actual experience. So as we are talking, there we call it an AI feed, but it's kind of a heads up display of what we've discussed so far, not closed captioning word by word, but more breaking it into what we call catch ups or insights or action items. So if
Good
I
point.
said, hey, Andy, after this meeting, I'll send you our white paper, it's going to hear that and it'll pop up with a little check box. And if I choose, I can send that to you or to myself as an action item via any number of project tracking tools. So we integrate with a lot of different services that keep track of action items.
Well, that's so interesting. Now, as you're looking globally, you and I both know that cultures are extremely different in how they meet and what gets done. I mean, just think some of the mergers of car companies that couldn't get along because they met differently. Expectations were different. So, what
Mhm.
role do you play in either leveling that playing field or respectfully allowing meetings to reflect the cultures of whoever's meeting? It's not a simple story in real life.
No, it's not. One of the things that we did in the early days is we were really thinking a lot about the actual meeting process and what happens during meetings and how to rethink that. And one of the things that we developed was what we called Q mode, where every person had exactly 2 minutes or equal time to speak. And so you can imagine for some people that was nowhere near enough time or what they're used to. And for a lot of people, it's very hard to speak for 2 minutes straight. That would never have been their level of participation. And as much as we liked it, and it had some great use cases, especially for meetings that need to start and end at a certain time, and you can imagine like even political debates, that would be really
Yeah.
important. It's very hard to get people to change their behavior. So we
I'm
actually
sorry, go ahead.
sunset that.
Oh, that is so
but
true.
I think it is fascinating, and we hope to go back to that. We do have some customers or that are multicultural and have teams, say, in the US and in Japan. And what's really interesting is, as you know, in some regions, very hierarchical, certain people speak in meetings and others do not, which creates the need for a lot of after the meeting discussion about, okay, what actually happened? How are we going to respond to what was said? Because it's not a freewheeling, raising your hand and objecting type of environment. And we're working on with a customer right now that has exactly that issue. Their engineers are in Japan, their sales team is in the US, and not only do they have a language difference where AI can help, but they have a cultural difference of how information is sort of passed back and forth between teams.
Well, that takes us to that big question, how information is passed, understood, and acted upon among people who have something to get done. I once had a wonderful client in Mexico, and they were expanding into the States, and they really had communication problems because it didn't matter the language, it was the meaning of the words and how one is expecting things to get done. And they were really stymied by trying to figure out how to co-create cultural diversity into, a uniform way of getting things done and knowing how to hold people accountable. So this is really so cool. One of the things that you suggested we talk about is what lessons have you learned from building? I don't want to leave the international question. I'll come back. But I like the idea of thinking about it at this point in our conversation. How did this come together? Because it sounds like this wonderful entrepreneurial business that's going to morph and remorph as your clients literally co-create with you solutions
Mhm.
to their particular problems. Am I making that up or is that what you're seeing?
We try, all of my experience in tech and early stage companies has taught me that the best way to grow a business is to, at the beginning, just listen. You have
Mm,
a hypothesis about something you want to build and bring into the world, and that's wonderful. But as quickly as you can, getting that in front of a customer and just watching them use it, listening to
yes.
what it's done and what it hasn't fixed yet, that's the only way to really get there. And so we are trying to evolve listening to the needs of the companies, just like I mentioned, like the company who has a team in Japan, one here, and what their real challenge is as a company. If we can fix that for them, then we can fix it for everybody like them. So we try to choose early customers that we think are representative of big pockets that we can help and build to until we've got something that they're really dependent on, and then we've got something.
Ramsey, though, how do you measure impact? I'm thinking, and forgive me for thinking, because I work with companies that need or want to change it. And I'm thinking about what would be a sales pitch to them about the impact that this would have, other than making note taking easier, which might be a value or may have limit value. So, your thoughts?
Yeah, that comes down to that enormous amount of time that people spend in
Yes.
meetings that's wasted. And so one of the biggest metrics that we just finished a business case for a company that we're working really closely with right now. They have 300 people in their sales and go-to-market team, and we have already figured out 4 or 5 tasks they do every day, how long it took them before using Rumi and how long it took after. And we said, look, we don't want to give you some hyperbolic number that no one believes in, but these are the tasks that we're helping you with. Just tell us how many, you fill in the math and tell us how many people are going to be using it for how long the before was, how long after, and what does that add up to in hours? And the answer was 33,000 hours they're going to save in the first year of salespeople time. And selling time is highly valuable and very measurable.
Yes.
So they can further extrapolate how many dollars that would equate to, but it equals 15 extra salespeople on their team. So they can decide what that's worth to them. But we like working with revenue teams because they do quantify everything. And once it's proven for the revenue teams, then it's easier to make the case for, well, what about your marketing team or your legal team or your operations team? Look how much it saved for your sales team.
When you're doing this and thinking about it, though, I can see it being measurable there. Um, of a whole organization, you're expecting them to change their behavior of learning what is going on with each other and how to act on it. This is more than even behavioral modification. This is a new set of habits, a new cognitive world, where their reference is going to be different than being at a meeting and hearing what it is they think someone said. I always say it isn't what they said, it's what you heard. And those aren't the same things. So help
Mm-hmm.
me as I'm thinking with this with you, how do you change behavior and make it more meaningful in a different way?
It's a great question. I I don't know about you, but I personally have experienced in the last year, before I start to do anything, I'm almost reflexively going to a tool like ChatGPT and starting there where I would have started in Google or maybe started looking somewhere else first.
I agree.
Now I look at ChatGPT and I'm like, oh my gosh, I can do this really quickly.
Yes.
And so what we have trained in ourselves and what we're trying to train in our customers is if there's information you're looking for, the first reflex for a lot of people is to go ask somebody. That it's to go Slack a colleague or go tap somebody on the shoulder and say, "Hey, can I ask you a question?"
Yep.
When that first action is asking meeting memory, 9 out of 10 times that answer already exists. It's been discussed ad nauseum most of the time. And if you start there and you ask meeting memory, hey, how many customers we have in Germany? Or why do we make this decision? Or what is the answer to this question? Most times it's there. And right there, that is a huge time savings for yourself and
Yep.
for whoever you are going to go ask. And then,
Mhm.
if you think about that at an organizational scale, that's a lot of time every day back. And
So
that's
in a
the beginning
way,
of it.
I mean, I think this is fantastic and fascinating because in a way, you're personalizing an AI chat. And so it's about us in our meetings, not about the world. And like I could go to chat and say, can you tell me more about XYZ? I can say the same thing now about we. And you can also now be accountable for what is said by whom in a meeting. And then what happens as a result of that? And did they really mean that? And therefore, I'm going off to do this. Is that really what you wanted me to do?
Mhm.
Ah,
Yep.
really fantastic.
Less
Um,
wasted time, and also just knowing, hey, we have this upcoming project. Who has expertise in this? Usually that's up to whoever's brain is deciding who to tap for something. But with 100 people and a year of data, you could know exactly who knows something about this market you're going to go into, or this, who do we know in this field that we've ever met with outside the company. All those conversations, when they're recorded, that can be a really good resource for figuring out who you can tap into.
do you also now see a change in how we agendaize a meeting? What's on topic, who talks, and how it's done?
We hope so. I would say that's slower, but I think the hope is there. One of the things that is very easy to do, which you've pointed out earlier, doesn't always happen. It's just having an agenda. And if you have the agenda before you have the meeting, maybe just ask meeting memory, hey, we're going to talk about these things. This is what we know so far. Read this before we start. And then you can skip the first 15 minutes of the meeting where you're just loading up everybody's memory of what we already know.
Yep, I love it. It's exciting. Now, you're approaching the international. You told us a little bit about the Japanese and the US dilemma, two different
Mhm.
cultures trying to do something similar. What are the other opportunities or obstacles that you're seeing as you're trying to explain to the rest of the world that you're on the, the tipping point of transforming the way we get things done? Am I right?
Yeah, and I think you can choose so there's in tech, we often talk about product market fit. And I think for the longest time, the only part of that equation that you could really focus on was product.
Hmm.
And now that it's easier to go in and out of markets, you can also think about product market fit from the other side and market fit. And if you have a great product, you can think about which markets are really ready for this product today instead of, well, I've got to change the product because the market side is fixed.
Mm.
And I've learned so many times taking technology to different places in the world that whatever looks good on paper, the on the ground reality is quite different. And it's down to things like culture and timing and things you won't know.
You are an anthropologist at heart, aren't you? Um, because you know what you put on paper is your perception of a reality that doesn't exist. I always say there's no reality. There's just an illusion that your mind creates with that story. And the other part is that the only truth is there's no truth. So you may be certain, but there's no certainty. This is such fun. Ramsey, as you're thinking about, let's say the next, I'm a futurist. What do you see coming for this over the next year? Times you don't have to go 20-year plans. We're going 20-month plans. But you have a vision for where this may go, other than I like to have a lot of clients. But
Mhm.
my hunch is that each one of them is going to morph this in a fashion that reflects who they are and their culture. Any thoughts about what you see coming?
I think it, maybe coming back to this international idea, I think these things kind of happen in waves, and I think that there's early adopters, at least within our field, that we think, hey, we see this happening here, and we think that this is going to be more common in other places where it's uncommon. And in our world, the idea of recording meetings is incredibly common in the US. We're
Yep.
used to seeing note takers show up. There's parts of the world that are very uncomfortable with that. But I think it's here to stay. And I think that once you see the benefits and just instead of just thinking about, potential downsides, it becomes really powerful. And I think we've all gotten used to cameras being everywhere. That's part of our life. You check in for a flight and they're taking your picture and checking you in that way. And I feel like that in the next year, there's going to be more comfort with conversations being recorded. Of course, not any and every conversation, and it comes with trust and consent. But we certainly see how amazing it is to just not have to try and remember or write down everything, but to have access to every conversation that ever happened. It's pretty transformative.
No kidding. It is another world. It's so interesting because I don't particularly like the note takers that pop up, but I never knew why I don't like the note takers. I'm going to ask more about, will you have a note taker and shall I, do they use it? Is this something important for them so they don't have to take notes?
Hmm.
My aversion to it, I can't even understand my aversion to it. I'm usually an early adopter on stuff, but
Hmm.
for some reason I find it as if there's another person in the room that doesn't
Yeah.
belong there and it intrudes on my privacy with the conversation. It does, even if it isn't another person, but it has the same quality to it. I know.
I completely feel that. And that's why we liked in our meeting platform, there was no notion of a note taker. It was just being recorded and it had a different feel, even though the end result was exactly the same.
Yes, but by personalizing it as a note taker, my instinct goes, but I don't really want another woman or another guy in the room. Thank you very much. You can take
Yep.
notes. But it is for me an interesting and it's interesting to get aware to it. Okay, this is so cool. Now, usually we're about ready to wrap. I think we have really taken this apart. Is there something you would make sure that you haven't forgotten, and then give the listener one or two or three things that they should remember as they're thinking about this great transformation, because you're at the tipping point of a major change in so many things. It's not just in the note taking.
Mm, I feel like maybe we are in I think when the networks came out, there was this feeling of like, what should I share? What am I comfortable sharing? And people like me were very cautious about that. And I feel like with my kids, they live in this world where everything
Yeah.
is recorded out there online. And it feels like that's where the world is going. So I guess the thought I am, reminding myself of is that be intentional, be upfront about what's you are recording and what information you're sharing. If you're at work, remember that you are at work. And, if you're having a conversation that you don't want being recorded, maybe that's not a conversation to have on your work machine or, on company time or company technology. But beyond that, I think having institutional knowledge captured is incredibly powerful. When we have new employees join, they're like, I can't imagine starting and not having this as a resource. I can ask anything about the history of the company. Who knows who? I could say, who is Andi and where does she live and who are her kids' names? And it's there. And so when you get used to that, it's a pretty different world. But I don't feel like it's a scary world, but I can
No,
see
I
why
think it's
people would have
I
trepidation.
think you're opening up a huge opportunity for us to be better people, maybe. I keep thinking there's a real positive part of this because it makes remembering much easier. And but to your point, when I can't remember something, I just ask chat, and I feel I'm getting lazy, but maybe I'm not. Maybe I'm just getting more efficient. Yeah, I can
Time will
name.
tell.
Well, but I can name it any way I'd like to, and I'm both lazy and more efficient. But it is the brain is a very powerful thing not to waste. And then what do you use it for? Do you use it for the creative solution of problems or taking notes? And then reading your notes and trying to figure out what did we say and who said what, and how do I remember how to actually implement and who am I accountable to? What's my responsibility? Makes it all so cool. Well, if they want to reach you, where can they do that?
Feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm very active there. That's the one social network where I am active. But yeah, if people have questions or are interested, feel free to reach out to us.
I'm delighted. So, for all of you who come, I thank you for joining us, whether you're watching or you're listening. This is a really cool conversation today, isn't it? And I'm so
Yeah.
honored that Ramsey came and said, "Can I be on your podcast?" And I said, "Sure. What are we going to talk about?" And he said, I'm going to talk about Rumi." I said, "Okay, well, it is Rumi." And I've learned a lot myself about note taking and not as an end, but as a means to something bigger. And I love the idea that if you have a question, you go to chat. Well, why don't you go to Rummy? And now your questions are in the fold of where you are and what can be done here. Cool, really cool stuff. Anyway, I'm delighted for all of you who do come. Oh, my books are all on Amazon and Barnes and Noble. Remember, our job is to help you see, feel, and think in new ways. We love to help companies change. We're Blue Ocean strategists, and at this time of change, it's a great time to create new markets and add value innovatively, much like Ramsey does. He didn't call himself a blue ocean thinker, but this is a big blue ocean of unmet needs, and there's not much competition. Lots of little stuff, but nothing as big as this one. And my job is to help you take your curiosity, take your observations, turn them into innovations, and soar. So soar with me and come back and tell me other people you want me to share with you, and we can all keep growing together. And thanks again. Please have a wonderful day. Ramsey, please enjoy your own journey. It sounds like it's terrific. And I don't know what your kids are doing, but I know that you're going to make sure they take notes.
Oh,
Uh,
yes.
Goodbye, my friend. Take care and thank you.
My pleasure, Andrea. Thank you.